moments in a Lotter Room and County Hall. But anyway, we all suffer for our art. So, anyways, my name is Ross Henley. I'm chairman of the Constitution and Governance Committee. On my left is Mr. Councillor Tim Curley, our vice chairman. We're surrounded by members and officers who are supporting the committee today. Welcome, welcome everybody, including members of the public, if there are any joining us today, this afternoon. Today's meeting will be run using the usual webcasting system via the wonderful Microsoft Teams. Committee members and key officers are physically present in the Lutler Room at County Hall in Taunton. Other elected members of the public and officers may physically observe or remotely join the meeting to speak on specific agenda items or just plain observe for public entertainment. This meeting is being webcast and therefore other members of the public and partners can observe the meeting remotely. The agenda pack is made available via ModGov or directly from the council website from the link which has been sent out to our members. This meeting has also been audio recorded as well. Now, finally, as agendas are now viewed electronically, could I kindly request that members and officers refer to page numbers from the published agenda pack to assist all present in finding the appropriate information. And for those members who are joining us online, we won't forget you. Our wonderful Pippa, who's supporting this committee today, will be, I think you'll be monitoring the hands raised on the online function, can't you? I can't cope with that. I'm terrible. I run courses virtually all the time, every week, and the one thing I'm terrible is that no people raising their hands online. But Pippa's all over it. She's in control. Okay, thank you. So item number one is apologies for absence. We have a notification for Councillor Lovell. It's given his apologies. He's substituted by Councillor Stanton. Councillor Carswell is not with us today. He's given his apologies. And Councillor Ashton is therefore substituting for him. We have apologies for absence from Councillor Hugh Davis. I haven't been notified of any substitute. No? Okay, that's fair enough. Item number two is the minutes of the previous meetings which took place. When could this be? Was it back as far as 11th of September? And that's on page 9. Can we confirm the accuracy of the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of September? And if agreed, I will sign the minutes as a true, correct record. All those in favour? Yeah, agree. That is carried. Item number 3 is declarations of interest, which is page 23 and 24. Members are invited to declare any interest regarding any matters on the agenda and to specify the nature of that interest. Highlights obviously the standard declarations of panel and committee members in relation to their membership of town and parish councils, which are already duly published on the council's website. Item number 4 is public question time. I don't have any formal notification or pre-notification of any public questions. Do we have any? No? Not today. Not today, thank you. Okay, we move swiftly on then to the main meeting then to number 5, the scrutiny function review. Proposed changes to the Constitution, Part G1, pages 25 to 52. And I'm going to invite Scott Waltridge, Head of Democratic and Governance Services, to my immediate right, who's going to introduce the report, which is included in the agenda pack.
Thank you, Chair. And again, all members will appreciate that at your last meeting, the committee received the scrutiny review that had been undertaken by the Scrutiny Task and Finish Group and had been reported to the Scrutiny Corporate and Resources Committee meeting at the end of August. You'll know that that report and discussion back in September then led to the review being recommended in full to the full council meeting at the end of September. One of the actions within that review included reviewing the council's constitution to take account of recommendations that review had. Specifically, one of those recommendations included reducing from 5 scrutiny committees to 4 scrutiny committees. And the Task and Finish Group and both the Corporate Resources Committee had spent some time looking at the proposals for how to achieve that. Again, they were contained in the report that went to this committee and then similarly on to full council. So in effect, the report that you have before you today is effectively acting upon the very decision that council made at the end of September. But effectively, this is seeking to show those changes that are now required to Part G1. One of the things that the Scrutiny Committee for Corporate Resources was very clear on was that whilst we bring forward the changes to Part G1, that the actual implementation of that change should be in May 2026. So whilst you have the constitutional changes before you, they do have a implementation date set for May 26. And again, that's to coincide with the next annual general meeting of the council. So that's the context to what you have before you. And again, Chair, as always, happy to answer any questions that councillors may have.
Thank you very much, Scott. Any councillors wish to ask any questions or raise any queries or make any comments regarding the report which has been drafted by Scott and his team? Councillor Pugsley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Well, as Mr. Wooldridge says, the substance of the proposed changes has already been through full council. This gives effect to those changes in the Constitution. And from my perspective, the changes in the Constitution follow the decisions that we've taken and make some very, to my mind, eminently sensible additions to the document. I am mindful of the fact that the Constitution really is a living document. And one of the essences of the review that we undertook was to say that the changes need to be monitored for their ongoing effectiveness, and that there will be review in early 2027. So I would like to propose that we accept these proposed changes, knowing that the Constitution is a living document, and at some point in the future, if necessary, we can return to it and amend it.
Pugsley, that's a recommendation for Councillor Pugsley. I will seek a formal seconder, but there's a couple of people wish to speak first, and we'll come back to that. Councillor Johns.
Thank you. I was going to raise the same point as well, that at some point we maybe need to document that it is going to be reviewed, especially in light of some of the scrutiny committees looking like they have got quite a full list of responsibilities, and we need to make sure those are going to be manageable. I was just looking at the lists on the Constitution, and they have been curtailed a lot from the sort of expansiveness they had before in terms of detailing what sat under which communities. So there's a lot of things that have been taken out. I was just slightly concerned that with so much being removed from communities, it wasn't clear where they were going on the initial documents. I know on the fuller appendix tables, it lists where legal and communities and culture are going, but there's nothing in the main document that shows where some of those items that are now being reallocated are going to be. And I just wondered if we ought to think about maybe expanding those initial lists to be a bit more clear where things are sitting.
Just to clarify, I mean, the structure of the document is, you'll remember as part of the scrutiny, we had a high level summary. Effectively, the high level summary is what's in part G1. Part G1 makes reference to what is shown on page 49, which is Appendix A1. So it's proposed that that detailed list of functions, which currently isn't in the council's constitution, would actually be added. So that's something we're seeking as an improvement. So there's greater transparency and clarity for both councillors, but also the public.
Now, I appreciate that, and it's great to have that full breakdown within the Constitution. I just wondered if the first table in G1 ought to have a little bit more information as to what it contains.
That one, Scott, are you?
Again, I'm certainly in terms of if the committee's got any specific views or suggestions. I know what we've included in part G1, as I say, is exactly what was in the scrutiny review, which was the high level summary. So we've just literally transposed what council agreed as the high level summary into part G1. We've not shortened it or changed it. It's literally just been transposed.
Thank you. To speak on this item. No, it's awful, isn't it, Helen? Nice to see you. Hope you're well. So we have a standing proposal to accept the recommendations report from Councillor Pugsley. Is anybody willing to second that? Do you want to speak, or are you seconding? Seconding from Councillor Kelly. Sue, Councillor Osborne, do you want to speak? Okay. So we have a proposal by Councillor Pugsley, seconded by Councillor Curley. to accept the recommendations, to consider the proposed revisions to Part G1 of the Council Constitution and recommend the full Council for implementation for the 18th of May next year, 2026. All those in favour? Not, no, okay, sorry, I don't think so, Helen. And any against? So moving on to item number 6 was the electoral update report. Jonathan Doyle, Head of Electoral Services, and Stephen Lake, Head of Electoral Management, to introduce the report included in the agenda pack. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It's been an incredibly busy time for the Electoral Services team during the last quarter, so I would like to thank the committee for listening to and taking a keen interest in the wider works of the team, and not just those that have traditionally come here. So thank you for the opportunity to update you on some of these. The annual canvass, the exercise that enables the team to publish an accurate and up-to-date electoral register, this year has been coupled with a postal vote refresh and a number of elections, meaning that it's been all hands to the pump at points during the last few months. A change in legislation has meant that all electors who have previously registered to vote and had this arrangement in perpetuity now have to re-register every 3 years. So the legislative change means that applicants now have to provide a copy of their signature and the national insurance number, which means that the re-registration process is a lot more manual, time and labour intensive. So this exercise has led to the team needing to contact via post more than 63,000 postal voters, and then to process their reapplications upon their return. So since the first correspondence was sent out on the 16th of September, nearly 24,000 reapplications have been received back and processed by the team. So that's around about 11,000 a month, with more coming in all of the time. Despite the attempt to channel shift applicants to digital applications, which speeds up enormously the administrative process, 66% of the returns so far have been physically received by us by the post into the post rooms in County Hall and Brimton Way, meaning a large increase in the incoming post that has also required additional staffing at times to be allocated to the post room to cope with that increase. So all reapplications will need to be received and processed by the 31st of January of next year. Otherwise, those postal voting arrangements which were previously in place will be removed. However, electors can reapply for the postal vote at any time. So all electors who have lost their postal votes will be contacted and informed of how to reapply should they miss that reapplication deadline. It's estimated that we will need to rerun this process again with a further 20,000 postal votes next year, and a further 20,000 will need to reapply for their postal votes the following year. So this exercise has been complicated by the fact that a number of elections have been run in the same period. So therefore, the team have needed to prioritise the processing of the reapplications from those who live in those voting areas to ensure that those within those relevant areas receive their postal votes without issue. As noted within the report, the team have administered a number of elections during that time, including the administering of 2 vacancies for here at the Unitary Council. So we've administered 8 town and parish council vacancies, or run elections for 8 town and parish council vacancies, 2 unitary council by-elections, and add to that a neighbourhood plan referendum in Oak during that time. As I'm sure the committee are aware, regardless of the type of election, the timetable and process for each type of election are exactly the same. It's just a question of scale and volume. The administration of each election requires a number of the core staff, election team staff, being taken away from other roles, which has put further pressure on the capacity to perform the other time-bound tasks. As mentioned, at the same time as all of this, the team have needed to undertake the annual canvass. So the annual canvass is the legal process where electoral registration officers contact every residential address in the county to ensure that the electoral register is accurate and complete. So we do this to confirm the details of people currently on the register, to identify new eligible voters, for example, those who have either recently turned 18 or have moved into the property or into the areas, to remove individuals who have moved away or are no longer eligible, and to maintain an accurate register for elections, jury service, identity checks, and for other purposes. So each reply then needs to be processed to either confirm no changes, to amend the elector and/or property records, or to request further information if it's required. So there are legal timetables set for the running of this exercise, and the register was published as planned on the 1st of December. It confirmed the number of electorate within the Somerset Council administrative area as 454,394, with the number of properties being 274,691. So these are a change to the estimated figures that were available at the time to be published in the report. So this exercise has thrown up an interesting statistic in that now over 300,000 of the electorate, just about 2/3, have chosen to opt out of the open register. So that's the register that can be purchased by anyone for anything other than electoral purposes. So the number of opt-outs effectively renders that register meaningless. Further legislative changes are due to be enacted whereby newly registered electors will be assumed to have opted out of the register and will need to opt in for its inclusion, which again makes it further redundant. So work on the
Theo, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, if you don't mind me asking a question about that. So this is the register, the unredacted one, sorry, the redacted one is the one that I can for my business buy and use for marketing purposes. Do we have an idea of how many times people are now buying it? Because as you say, it does seem like it's a fairly pointless document. Is there still an interest in people buying it?
Not really. The people who do purchase it, as you're aware, political parties and others are, and elected members can have it for free. The full register rather. The credit reference agencies purchase the full register as well if they they can have it. Any requests to view the full register is by appointment. People can't make any copies of it. They just make copies by hand. It's very seldom, very, very few and far between that anybody requests to either view or purchase the open register.
It sounds to me like it might be time for the government to scrap the whole concept of this this register.
The legislative changes, it's a nod in that direction, I would have to say. But the full registers were kept in the library, sometimes kept in some libraries to be viewed by appointment only. Yeah. And again, no kind of ability to reproduce it. But yeah. Thank you. So work on the postal vote refresh will continue unabated until the end of January. But with the canvass now complete, the team are now started to plan for the elections in 2027, believe it or not. So the additional consultation period to the LGBCE review, which we'll touch on in an item a little bit later, has necessitated in a delay to the official start to the review of the polling places and polling districts, which was planned to commence in January of next year. However, the team will commence an informal audit of the polling places during the new year to ensure suitability of polling stations for location, access, connectivity, etc. Going forwards. So the review of the polling districts will commence when confirmation of the boundary and electoral arrangements is received with a fair wind in March 2026. The new electoral scheme to be built on EROS, the electoral management system, where all maps, properties, elected details and boundaries are held. So that can't be completed for the new boundary arrangements until and unless we receive the published LGBCE review. However, I am confident that the delay in that publication will not put at risk at this stage the safe and legal running of elections in 2027. However, the planning for the counts, staffing, equipment, logistics, etc., are all currently underway. We'll, I'm sure, cover off the LGBCE update under the separate agenda item. But if I can just hand over to my colleague Steve, who will give a bit of an update about the currently ongoing community governance reviews.
Thank you, Chair. The Huish Episcopi and Langport review, we now know that both parish councils, it's on, yeah. Can I try for there? Yes, well, right. Both parish councils have decided that they don't want warding, which makes the whole process somewhat easier, and certainly from an electoral point of view, makes it a lot easier. But the whole thing is now with our legal team to find out what information is required from them, which will be their resources, all of the stuff that they have, their agreements, any possible staffing issues, because we know that the town clerk, for example, wants to retire, so there's TUPE issues. So we've thrown it over to the legal people now just to find out exactly what is required in the order which will be made, and we'll be coming back to you with that sort of information so that you can agree to the order going through. The review for Ansford and Castle Carey, the consultation period finishes on the 8th of December, and we're just going to have to analyse all the responses that we've got, both electronic and paper. And when I say paper, these are all individual pieces of paper that people have responded on. Yeah, yes. Yeah, well, we will not, there's no point in asking that question until it closes, because we usually get a rush at the very end. So, so yes, we'll obviously be doing that, or I'll be doing it probably next week. And I mean, there is two sides to that. One wants it to go ahead and the other one doesn't. It's not an unusual occurrence in these circumstances. We have asked all parish and town councils whether they wish to change the number of councillors that they have. It usually comes up before the 4 yearly elections. So we've actually preempted it by asking them, so that we can come to you in plenty of time and go through a process of saying, you know, we want to change from X to X. So at the minute we've had 4 requests.
Stephen, can I just interrupt there to get clarification? I'm not quite sure what that question's about. If we're getting a number of councillors from the LGBTE, whatever, I never remember the acronym, how does this sit alongside that? I'm a bit confused, sorry.
Well, those which aren't having change, of which there's a very large number of parish councils which will be unchanged. We will do a community governance review if they want to change the number of parish councillors. And if I give you some sort of examples, we've got 2 who want to increase and 2 who want to decrease. So if we look at West Monkton, for example, which has 4,500 electors, it has currently 9 parish councillors, which isn't enough for that sort of area. Martock, on the other hand, has 3,900 electors and has 15 parish councillors, and it can't get enough people to actually serve on the parish council. So they want to reduce to a more realistic number so that it can go ahead. Ashwick wants to reduce from 11 to 9, and Chapel Allerton, I don't know if anybody knows Chapel Allerton, it's largely three small areas, they've only got 5 parish councils and they'd like to have 7 so that they can have better representation across the geography. So it's that sort of thing that we'll be
So can I,
looking at.
sorry, can I just clarify then? So while the LGPC does the Somerset councillors, responsibility for the number of parish councillors sits with Somerset Council.
Yeah, unless the LGBC is suggesting changes to parishes by different wards, etc. And I think, largely we can predict that Chapel Allerton isn't going to be changed greatly.
It's getting fun, isn't it? So if a parish which was warded wanted to change the numbers, would that be something that we could do? If, for example, it had, I mean, it would be trickier, wouldn't it? Because you'd have to try and retain electoral balance between those wards. But could we do that as well?
As long as it's not affected by the LGBC. It's good that we're actually getting some requests now, because it's a lengthy business, because we still have to go through 2 lots of consultation, etc. Even if nobody's going to actually raise any issues, which in the past I've never found anybody actually wanting to suggest something completely different. But we have to go through the proper legal process to get there.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it does seem bizarre that just to change the numbers of councillors, you've got to go through, from memory, more or less a 2-year process, which is the same time as if you're wanting to change boundaries or do more complex things. But I guess that's something they've got to live with. Now that the Boundary Commission have reopened as well, is there a possibility that they could also recommend changes to some parish councils as a consequence? Do we know if they're going to do that?
Only consequential changes, Chairman. So if they create new wards, then they will change the electorate figures. But otherwise, they will not change parishes, because that is the responsibility of this council.
Just a specific checkpoint on the Hewish and Langport merger, if I may. So you said that jobs will be across. Good to hear there won't be warding. So what's the process for changing over the clerkships? Because there's a clerk and assistant clerk at Langport, and then a clerk at Hewish Episcopi. At what point and how do those jobs, do they just get transferred to the new council, and the new council starts with those 3 roles and then decides what to do?
This is where we're seeking legal advice to make sure we get it correct. At the end of the day, it won't be the end of the day. Let's say on the 1st of April of 2027, the 2 existing councils will disappear. And on the 1st of April, the new council will come into existence. Now, the order will have in it something along the lines that 3 members of this council will be appointed as parish councillors in the interim until the new parish council is elected. And that will operate with, I suspect, the existing staff, and the new parish council following elections will have to decide on the appointment of staff, who's going to do what.
Referring back a bit, I don't think there was an election in Hinton St George on the 18th of September. What happened there was that because the parish council decided they couldn't afford to have an election, they persuaded a lot of most of the candidates to withdraw. It's a slightly undemocratic process, but they said they just couldn't afford to pay for the election, so there wasn't an election then.
Yeah, so effectively there was an election, but not a poll. So there wasn't a contested election. Yeah.
Actually, I'll defer until the next agenda item, because they're sort of linked. Yeah.
Yeah, it just seemed, presumably, when we formed the Taunton Town Council, there's some precedent for what happens with clerks, because there were some clerks who were clerks to parishes there that were taken into the Taunton, and from memory, I think they had to be offered positions. So I'm sure there's some precedence on how this has to be dealt with from that experience.
I think that's right, but we don't know at the minute who actually wants to carry on in any event, because it may well be that the clerk for Hewish.
I think they were invited to express whether they were interested from memory.
So it is going to be that sort of process, and the new council will then have to decide what their staffing structure is going to actually look like.
So sorry, I believe it falls under the bounds of 2P transfer.
Yeah.
So obviously there's a very formal legalistic process that needs to be followed through that. So, you know, as we said, we're taking some advice around that, and it's going through that information gathering process now to see what effectively, to see how any new parish council will be affected by that, and therefore what staff will be entitled to transfer. And I think that's part of it, is that somebody has an entitlement to transfer under 2P, whether they take up that opportunity or not. That's not for us to decide, or for us to get involved in. That's a little bit further down the line from this process.
Councillor Whale.
Thanks, Chair. The practical side of this numbers for parishes is actually the parishes like to get their numbers, because what they find, they usually search around the parish, find enough numbers, and if they have more, they persuade those not to stand, so they don't have to have an election. That's my experience of my parishes. And if they don't get enough, they just elect what they have and then co-opt a couple to make the numbers up. It's generally just to avoid having elections, to be honest. Parishes are quite clever at doing this, I find. Is that your experience?
Well, you could say that, Chairman. I couldn't possibly comment.
Yeah, it's just a question on, where you have got 3 becoming 2 in terms of clerk numbers. What's the position regarding redundancy in these matters?
Yeah, that's certainly outside of our knowledge and responsibility. And so, as I say, we're taking legal advice on.
So that will be bundled up into legal. Okay, that's fine. And the other, and it's more an observation, especially now we're looking at full cost recovery, and there's been some quite biggish numbers mooted for what parish councils should be putting aside for elections and what it's likely to cost them. And the example that Councillor Ashton has just given, where there's actually almost a deal done to prevent an election, understandably, when you look at the cost. But is it worth noting how many examples of that happens? Because there is a risk that you won't get an agreement, and that it does feel very undemocratic that anyone who wants to stand can in effect no longer put their hat in the ring. In fact, to be honest, my experience is slightly different to Martin's, that it's actually finding people to come forward and be prepared to be co-opted. We've got the problem at the other end.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted a quick question about the annual canvass. I was just wondering how many, what sort of percentage failed to return?
I don't have those figures, I'm afraid. Steve?
I don't know the figures, but what we have now, of course, is a different sort of canvas to the traditional, because we're initially only sending out to those properties where we believe there may have been a change, or we don't actually already have information. And so that's about 20%, let's say. And then for the other 80%, we send out a form to them saying, this is what we've got, let us know if it's changed. So it's not clear as it used to be, because we can assume if we haven't had a response, then there's no change, which is probably untrue, but nevertheless, that's the best we've got.
Item number 7 is the extension of the consultation period by the LGBCE on the new electoral arrangements for Somerset, pages 57 to 62. And I'm going to invite Jonathan Doyle and Stephen Lake to introduce this report, including the agenda pack.
Thank you again, Chair. So, in brief, the Local Government Boundary Commission for England, the LGBCE, has reopened the consultation on the draft recommendations for the new electoral arrangements for Somerset Council. The further period of consultation commenced on Tuesday the 25th of November and will run until the 14th of January of next year. The consultation has been reopened because the Commission initially and incorrectly understood Somerset Council's preference for predominantly single-member divisions as a formal request for a uniform pattern of single-member divisions under the legislation guiding its review process. No such formal request was made by the Council. So the final recommendations will now be published during March, date TBC 2026. The new consultation period provides organisations, groups and individuals with the opportunity to share their views on the future arrangements. However, the Commission have made it clear that all submissions previously made will still be considered and will not need to be resubmitted. So the discussion and decision for this committee is to decide whether it should provide a response and additional evidence during this consultation window, to decline to provide a further response, or to respond to the consultation, referring to previous responses and reiterating the Council's previously stated position.
Okay, our chair actually had discussions with officers and the leader on this one. We went through a very laborious process, quite brutal in some areas, quite challenging this time last year, and going into the new year, trying to present our initial response to the consultation on this, and we had a failed attempt at constitutional governance, and we came back and had a look at it again. Lots of members worked cross-party on this, and there was a fair deal of frustration as well. And I think there was equal frustration when, having put a lot of work in and submitted plans for predominantly single-member divisions, but in a number of cases we felt it community-wise and fitting the guidance for a few handful of two-member divisions, this was completely ignored, and they came back with 96 single-member divisions. At that stage, I think it was felt that there was very little point in pursuing any further attempts to get dual member divisions because they completely ignored our advice and our submission. I think, and pointing to the recommendation, we'll open this up for discussion. There will no doubt be a fulsome discussion, but bearing in mind that it is quite clear that the LGBC will note and already reconsider any evidence that's been put forward by them beforehand by Somerset Council and other interested parties. And I would propose that this council does not set up another working party, does not make another formal response to the consultation, because we've already made our position perfectly clear and they will reconsider it again. Of course, we would encourage interested parties like parish councils, political parties, individual members of the public, local organisations, if they want to participate in this process there, by all means can do so before the proposals, the consultation closes on January the 14th. But I'm going to open that up for discussion. Councillor Curley.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to reinforce what you just said. I think rather than risking opening Pandora's box again, which could be quite a painful experience, I think we, in fact, by not putting another submission in, strengthen our original submission. We're effectively telling them, please read properly what we sent you the first time. And I think that does strengthen the original case that we put in. So I would be quite happy just to stick by the original proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Just for clarity, I don't disagree with the direction of travel. I'm astounded that predominantly has been read as exclusively. I think they're different words spelt differently and with different meanings, but here we are.
Maybe
Are we suggesting, therefore, that we do the recommended option on here, which is paragraph 20, which is where we do respond and we just say, we said what we said? Yeah. Rather, we don't say nothing. We say, we just reiterate what we've already said, point to what we've already said, very short letter. Yeah, I'm all in favour of that.
Yes, thank you. I agree with everything that's been said so far. However, one of the things that we have been asked to do as community leaders, I suppose, is to publicise this. And one of the things that I thought was a weakness last time round, and this refers back to what we were talking about with parish and warding arrangements, was that there were a few suggestions made by the LGBTCBE that that were, for example, in my hometown, Frome, that they would change the parishes, and I didn't really focus on that. They would change the parish warding arrangements. I didn't focus on that because we were also focused on the unitary divisions. And I had a look at that when I was looking at the papers, and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking they've used an old map. There's a lot of new developments going on, 500 houses being built out, of which about 400 have been built, about 300 have now occupied. They're not shown on the map. They haven't taken account of that. And also, when I asked the town clerk at the time, you know, are you going to make a submission of this, I had the impression that it was done really quite quickly. And when I looked at it, I saw there's a particular part of Frome that's called Keyford that used to be a separate village, and it's got its own distinct, you know, identity, and it's been bunged in with the central area. It's been kind of ignored, and what they've done is, this is why I wanted to just clarify, they've actually made the suggestions of different ward boundaries. I actually want to publicise that. I get a newspaper column about once every 2 months, and it's coming up. And I just thought this is an opportunity to get local people to come forward. These wards are supposed to be based on what people feel is their local area. If I do that, will I complicate everything, and will I make more work for you, or does it just gets fed directly back to the LGCBE, doesn't it? It's nothing to do with us. We don't have to worry about it. Okay, that was my.
Yeah, it's not our consultation.
No.
So what we're discussing today is collectively as a committee whether we provided one of a plethora of other consultation responses. It's certainly we would encourage, and I'm sure that everybody would encourage as much evidence being provided to the LGBTE as possible. It doesn't complicate things at all for us. So yeah, publicise far and wide, and put forward the evidence that you think best suits and best reflects your community.
Thank you. I'll just.
So we pointed but obviously encourage people like yourself to promote the big news of jam reporting, promote your own ideas, and promote some general discussion in your own areas.
Yeah, well, that, yeah.
More people know about this, the more contribute.
I will do that, but I don't want to open a can of worms with the actual unitary divisions, and so I'm going to try to focus on the warding arrangements.
Okay.
I just wanted to check, given it's their consultation, we're not incurring any costs, or will we be billing them for any costs that this change has impacted on the Somerset Council? I mean, it just seems crazy. They changed the postal vote, which causes an incredible amount of work for us, from, you know, bringing it down to 3 years, and we're supposed to take the hit of all their decisions they're making. And I just wonder, are we pushing back and saying, actually, we want costs covered for any of these changes that they are implementing?
Haven't so far. Certainly with the changes in legislation with postal votes, for example, that there has been centrally funded new burdens funding made available in previous years, ironically not in this year, where there are actually bites. And in terms of our costs incurred because of the delay, I don't think there's been any discussion about pushing back, but I'm not 100% sure as to what additional costs that we have incurred through this. We obviously won't know unless there's an accelerated period of work that needs to be done to hit our publication of the canvas in December that reflects the new electoral register with the new electoral board and boundary arrangements. But I can't envisage there being an enormous amount of cost. Inconvenience, yes, but not cost.
So can I just clarify, the changes they made to the postal votes, which required a huge amount of extra work for this council, there wasn't any funding for that this year?
No additional new burdens funding in this financial year. for that. There was new burdens funding made available from central government for the preparation of changes, but not in terms of the application of the change.
The next one's Lee Redmond. Lee, hi, how are you? The
I
floor
saw
is
your
yours.
lips move. I saw your lips move, Ross, and assumed you were calling me, but didn't want to preempt it. So thank you for switching your microphone on. It's the procedural nerd in me that's coming out at the moment, and when the Boundary Commission kindly published their final draft proposals, which laid out a number of changes to our boundaries and showed the 96 different division wards, whatever you would like to call it at the time, it was called the final draft. So we assumed that there would be minor changes to that when they were supposed to publish a couple of days ago. The current additional consultation triggers somewhat confusing frustration within my little mind. Potentially what they're opening the door to do is I would read it that they could potentially change their final draft into a final proposal that we would then have to accept. What if they make changes to their previous final draft? Will they potentially have to consult on that again?
Highly likely that they'll make some changes, and every time that I've been involved in these processes, it hasn't been as laborious as this. But from the position of their first recommendation to the reopening of the consultation and their final recommendation, there's always been some changes reflected upon some representations made by any number of different people or organisations. There's always been some changes, and once there's final recommendations made, there's never been any recourse to further public consultation. There's just been laid before the Parliament. I'll ask officers to confirm that. That's my understanding, though.
Yeah, that's correct. So in terms of the previous final draft of final recommendations, Councillor Redmond, the only change in drafting is now that there's a cover sheet at the front that refers to an error in drafting on, I think it's paragraph 32.
Yes.
Where it says that the drafting is still exactly the same. It's just the reopening of a consultation on the same proposals that now makes it clearer that they will look at submissions advocating for and providing evidence for multi-member divisions, whereas previously the drafting, which is still extant, but there's an addenda at the front, which effectively kind of shut down those conversations. So that's the only change in the drafting. Once anybody provides any additional evidence and they've considered the evidence that has previously been submitted, they will then go away, consider everything, and what then they propose in March is what will be tabled to Parliament as the final draft. If that makes
Thank
sense.
you, Chair. Can I come back? Can I come back, Ross? Sorry.
You can, yes.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick points then. So I know it's already been said, but I'll say it out loud anyway. In the previous submissions to the Boundary Commission, there were references to multi-councillor divisions. So that's already was, I would assume, anticipated in their final draft, which is, again, it's frustrating. But what I would suggest, Chair, I'm not able to make a proposal, but your committee are talking about writing a letter to reaffirm our position of some sort. Could I suggest that we add some very strong words to the end of that, saying that we hope you aren't going to make any major changes to the previous draft based on this additional consultation, because it's likely to cause extreme problems for us, for both system procedurally, for as the council and councillors and parties?
Support that. I can see why you're suggesting that, but that's for committee to decide. I wouldn't support that, because we always know that between the first proposals and the final recommendations, there is probably going to be some changes, and we have to, as a council and political parties and interested parties, we have to get along with that and work with that, however frustrating that may be. And in some cases, there has been some quite major changes between the first and the final recommendations. And having made such a fuss is probably maybe too strong a word, regarding the words predominantly and exclusivity, I would be highly surprised if they did not come back with some changes. And if they came back with 96, I'd be astounded if they came back with final recommendations of 96 single member divisions and no dual member divisions. But I may be wrong. That's just a hunch. But, you know, having made such a fuss about that, we'll see. But I wouldn't be in favour of that, because I think we must make our judgment about whether we wish to further consult with this in terms of making any further representations. I prefer us to go with what we had before and point them to our previous submission and ask them to reconsider. But I don't think it would be appropriate personally to say that, you know, well, if you make major changes, it's going to cause us an awful lot of issues. I think, but anyway, I'll open it up. Councillor Osborne, Emily's been waiting.
Thank you. Firstly, many of us around this table sat over many, many meetings and toyed back and forth and argued with Stephen and Jonathan relentlessly about not only where things go, you know, road splitting divisions, and but also how the process works as far as Stephen is concerned. And I will still reiterate, thank you very much for the amount of work that you put in, both of you. It was a huge, huge amount of work, because AI hasn't caught up with this. It's a very, very long way into recreating boundary lines of an area. The amount of work that the councillors all did as well in the toing and froing is to be noted. And achieving what we did over several meetings as well was quite remarkable. Not everything was in the proposal that everybody wanted, but it was pretty close. And everybody was fairly well happy with what had been proposed. And so after Councillor Osborne, I'd like to recommend that 20 with a strongly worded note to say, please do not cause us any more grief on this. And we put forward an incredibly strong proposal in the first instance, which we all stand by, and I hope we all do stand by it after the work we put in, can be passed as quickly as we can in this committee meeting. Because I think we all did an amazing amount of work on it and cared very deeply about all sorts of aspects of this consultation. Thank you.
Emily, Councillor Wale. Wrong way around. Councillor Osborne and Councillor Wale. I do apologise.
Well, patience is a virtue and all that, but I'll stop it at that. What I was going to say was I would certainly support, as Emily does, paragraph 20. We did put a lot of work in there, and I don't think I'm at all surprised at the LGBCE throwing in what I would call a curveball, which is where they will do something that nobody asked for, nobody wanted, and nobody saw coming. From previous ones, and they've not disappointed this time. It's just that seems a very strange way to do it, that you announce the week before you're due to publish your final findings that you're going to reopen it up again. And what's more, you're going to reopen it up over the Christmas period. So in terms of putting a task and finish group together that can actually put together any meaningful proposals, I would say we haven't got the time to do it, because you've got 2 weeks of Christmas in the middle. What we probably need to do as well to ensure that people who may have missed out, which is probably where the Electoral Commission's concern is, that people who have missed out because they wanted to see multi-member wards, predominantly perhaps more in the towns than rural, that they now have an opportunity to make their submission perhaps in more detail than they have done previously. And for those that did argue for 2-member divisions, and I know that some of our councillor colleagues did, particularly in Minehead, and I suspect in other places, that they have an opportunity to add further weight to those submissions. I would have thought time-wise, the Boundary Commission can't change it too dramatically because we've been through this before. We've been through this. You change one bit and the rest knocks on. I suspect what may happen is that you may see a line squiggled out between divisions, so you make two into one, which would be the most practical way of doing it. But I support point 20. I'm disappointed that the Boundary Commission left it so late in the day, when at any time between part 1 and part 2, or even after closing June, they could have brought this to our attention, and they didn't. And potentially the only option we have, I feel, is 20, because to do anything else, as you say, it's Pandora's box, and we may wind up in a situation where instead of pleasing some of the people some of the time, we please nobody at any time.
Well, then, Councillor Online, Councillor Slocum.
Thank you. Having had dealings with the Boundary Commission before on 2 occasions, I think any talk of trying to influence them is rather a cloud cuckoo land. Frankly, you won't. I can assure you, you will not. And I'm sure you won't be able to comment on this either from the officers, but it is said that this is all due to a legal challenge to the Boundaries Commission, or something to do with the legal challenge, which something they admitted to do, and they are only doing this on a very short period to stop any legal action in judicial review. And that's the reason it's in front of us. Nothing we can much do about that, and the short period rather put strength to that reasoning, I believe. And I should suggest that we go along with the chairman's recommendation that paragraph 20 is the action we should be taking now, Chairman.
Slocum.
Excuse me. Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to say that I agree with all the speakers. I do think it's been very difficult. It hasn't pleased everyone. Some people have got double the size wards and some won't have. It's a very, very difficult one. But I was somewhat pleased in some respects, thinking that maybe they're rethinking it, maybe where there's multiple councillors in one ward and only ones in others. So I was actually pleased to some extent that maybe they're taking us seriously, because I do agree with Councillor Whale that often it feels like it feels a non-starter. You put a lot into this and then actually you wonder whether you've been listening to. So I welcomed the fact there was a bit of a gap on this. I don't welcome the time frame, but I know I'm only just mentioning this, Chairman, as a person that perhaps there are winners and losers. I may be the loser, but I thank you for taking this. I think it's a very, very important factor here, and I just hope we do make the right decisions. Thank you.
All right, in your backdrop, Jill, where are you in your backdrop?
I'm in Mars at the moment, but I will be back soon.
It looks like the Starship Enterprise.
It is. It is.
It is the Starship Enterprise.
Make it so.
Beam me up, Councillor Slocum.
Isn't that what we're going to do?
In a very, very turgid subject, Councillor Slocum, you brought us a moment of joy.
Thank you.
As fellow councillors, I think we're coming to a consensus on this, that we don't wish to open up Pandora's box, but we're waiting with Councillor Johnson. You want to come back in?
I'm not going to delay the decision. I am in agreement with the decision. I just wanted to ask, are we aware there was a legal challenge to the LGBCE that has prompted this to come about? And do we know who that legal challenge came from, if there was one?
I'm not aware that there was a legal challenge. My understanding is that there was an issue that could prevent a possible legal challenge, if that makes sense. In terms of, I don't think that a legal challenge or any kind of challenge of judicial review had been launched, but an issue was identified, that a loophole, if you like, that would need to go around again to prevent the risk of future judicial review.
Thank you. I was just going to suggest, because we've got, as I mentioned before, Christmas in the middle, there's a real risk that that this consultation opportunity could get lost, And perhaps come the new year, we need to put out some comms of our own, which I know we're very good at doing, but put some comms out of our own, reminding individuals, parishes, stakeholders that they have this opportunity to respond if they haven't responded already, or if they want to add to their previous submissions.
Notwithstanding, the LGBC have been quite proactive already in making their own comms in terms of every day on my social media accounts. I'm seeing responses from them. And there's some very interesting members of the comments from the members of the public as well. My favourite one is, well, I've got to look at this again. I already made a proposal for just 3 councillors last time. I'll have to make that again. But each to their own. Because I love a bit of consistency. But Jonathan.
Thank you. My understanding is from speaking to the LGBC is that they will proactively contact both everybody who has already submitted proposals and evidence to the consultation, contact everybody who is effectively on their own stakeholder list as potential respondees or responders to the consultation. I understand that from our own internal localities teams that a message will go out to all town and parish council clerks tomorrow. Again, just effectively pointing them in the direction of A, the press release, but B, the consultation documents as well. So, so yeah, we're doing what we can, but again, encourage everybody in this room and in the council to speak to their own stakeholders, groups, interested parties that they have to publish as far and wide as they possibly can.
Appoints members to the recommendation, which is one we agree that Somerset Council does not provide any more evidence, but replies to the consultation in writing, referring to our previous submissions and the preference for predominantly single-member divisions, but highlighting that the council had previously made suggestions for a small number of multi-member divisions. To agree that political parties, councillors, community groups and residents should all be encouraged to submit their own proposals and evidence to the consultation. Do we have that? Are we happy to put that as a proposal unamended? Or anybody wish to make an amendment to it? Happy to propose Councillor Curley, seconded by Councillor Butt-Philip. Just got a name quickly before Sue. All those in favour? That's carried. I think any abstentions? Any against? No, that's carried unanimously. Item number 8 is Constitution and Governance Committee Work Programme, pages 39 to 40. Invite committee members and other elected members to comment on the committee's work programme and recommend any suggested amendments or additions the committee can consider. I'm going to ask Scott, are there any edited highlights you wish to draw our attention to in the forward plan as well? What are we looking at next time, Scott? When are we meeting next time?
So the next meeting is on the 5th of February 2026. Again, there's a focus on the planning terms of reference, the contract procedure rules, and also we'll have an update as well on the community governance reviews.
Do you want, you looking for members to let you know now or any or in the near future? Councillor Kay. Councillor Oswald and Councillor Kay, sorry.
I have a feeling Councillor Kay may be wanting to speak on what I may be about to say, which is basically looking at the planning terms of reference report. Now, this committee did set up a task and finish group to do a light touch look at the planning terms of reference because we were clearly unhappy with some of the items in there and felt they wanted to be changed. My understanding is that after the first meeting, which unfortunately I couldn't make, or I didn't get the link to, that you decided that in the light of the infrastructure bill going through, that you would put it on hold for the time being. However, I think there is so much concern about the functioning or non-functioning of the planning service, and it was certainly added to the list of recommendations that Climate and Place added to the Conservative motion, sorry, a party motion to go back to full council. And I would have thought I'd like to see that task and finish group is now reconvened in the light of royal assent of the infrastructure bill, and that we start work on that again, and that it is member led and not officer led.
Are you wishing to speak on the same subject? As
It is, and I would just second all that. Yes, I just think that we should get on with it. And I think we will get some pushback from some of the council officers that will say that the planning infrastructure bill is imminent and it's pointless us doing things and changing things and wasting time changing things. However, we don't know when it actually becomes law and when, you know, things can be passed and then they don't actually get put into effect, sometimes for years. So I do think it's worth doing something in the meantime, and that's always been my position. Yeah.
There we are with that.
Certainly, I mean, clearly I'll take that away and talk to officers in our planning service as well about your request to reconvene that working group. Because clearly, in order to meet the target that's in our work plan, that needs to be meeting soon. Obviously, hopefully you'll appreciate whatever feedback I get from planning colleagues, but also colleagues in legal services. I will update you all by email between now and the meeting in February.
Can I just say that I agree with everything that's been said, planning, but I think it's now passed away from being a light touch review because of the new legislation, which is had royal assent. You think? We think
it.
and we are all getting trained on it as we speak, more or less. Coming up, is training coming up for all planning committees? I think about it on it, right? But because of that, it's not going to be a light touch because it's going to change planning. So therefore, I think this task and finish group ought to be having a very serious look at the planning side of the constitution, particularly as it affects councillors, because it is not right at the moment, does not work for planning and councillors. Doesn't work.
The Pearlstone and then Councillor.
If Councillor Osborne is going to continue the conversation about planning, I'd be happy to defer because mine's on a different issue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Pearlstone. Much appreciated. Thank you. I was just going to add that we recently met with Chris Hall to express planning concerns. And I drew his attention to this task and finish group, and he didn't seem to know an awful lot about it. So I'm afraid I did take the liberty of enlightening him by sending him a very shortened version of the papers that actually constituted the group. So he should be aware of that. It shouldn't come as a shock to him or his team. And you know, I would also take on board Councillor Wales' comment that if the planning and infrastructure bill has now received royal assent, we're currently getting training, or at least you are if your area committee is meeting. Meetings in Area South are a bit of a rare breed at the moment, or as someone put it, a collector's item. But apart from that, perhaps it does need to be now moved from being a light touch to something much more substantial, because echoing Councillor Wales' sentiments, I would agree, it doesn't work. It's not working for anyone. The close down, slow down period, I don't think it was perhaps the success it was meant to be, certainly not for customers on the ground. It might be working for officers, but it sure as hell isn't working for people on the ground.
Because we wish to speak on this subject, but I think we're beginning to drift into the work that any potential task and finish group or working party is going to be dealing on this. So I don't want to have an awful long debate about the rights and wrongs of the process and the planning and review legislation and everything, but I think we're all agreed that, and Scott has already offered to reconstitute this group at an early opportunity, and then these debates and discussions and points could be aired at the appropriate time then. But Barry, you wanted to come back. Barry Clark first and then Dawn.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, yeah. I thought Scott said that he would talk to the officers and think about it. I agree with the councillors that have spoken so far, Chair. And from recent experiences, I think it's essential that we get this review underway. And as Councillor Wales has said, perhaps somewhat more than light touch, I think it needs some proper direction. And just out of interest,
if we did a straw poll round here today, how many of the councillors would agree that we should go forward with the review somewhat more than the light touch? I mean, we've 4 have spoken so far.
That would be, I'm not sure how that's necessary or not, but I think we need to get this group reconstituted. Scott has willingly offered to do at the earliest opportunity, but I don't wish to get us into the whales and walls of what we're doing on this one. Then Councillor Johnson, you want to come back? Then Councillor Kay, and Councillor Philip. But Scott, you want to come in first? It might be a clarity to this.
No, again, just to qualify, yeah, I mean, the action I was going to take away is clearly just to work with officers in planning and legal services to reconvene the working group. It's not to think about it, it will be to reconvene, because that's something this committee has instructed officers to do. So just to be clear, that is something we will do. The other point I was just going to flag, just for clarity, and I was just checking on the position of the Planning and Infrastructure Bill. The Commons is due to reconsider a number of amendments on the 8th of December. Subject to that stage being completed, then it will proceed to royal assent. So it's not yet at the royal assent stage, but it is anticipated that if all that goes to planning government, then in early 2026 we will start seeing some of the parts of that bill actually become enacted. So there will be some early implementation. So I'm just trying to give this point about, are we waiting and waiting forever on government? No, we're not. These are some imminent changes, and therefore the reconvening of that working group, I would suggest, is certainly something that at this stage I would certainly hope should be done early in the new year at the latest.
Thank you, Scott.
So Johnson, then Councillor Kay.
I just wanted to check on the timeline. So if we are to implement any changes to the constitution on the planning terms of reference, what is the pathway that we need to operate within to make the changes? I'm also slightly concerned that planning recently postponed the local plan update, and wondering, are they even likely to have this recommendation by the 5th of February? And wondering if we've had any indication from them whether they are still meeting that working to that date of the 5th of February, or whether that's likely to get pushed on.
Just on the timeline point, I mean, hopefully members of the committee will be aware we go through an annual process of reviewing the council's constitution. So the reason why we have suggested that the planning committee terms of reference comes back in February is to position any changes to come to the council's annual general meeting in May 26. That would be regardless of the planning and infrastructure bill. I think the only thing we need to be mindful of is if and when the planning and infrastructure bill becomes law, that will effectively drive changes to our constitution, regardless of what this council may think, because we will have to comply with the law and its changes. So there are 2 parts driving the review. One is coming from central government, and the other is within our own gift. And I think it's how we address both of those elements together, hopefully at the same time, rather than doing 2 reviews. I think that's the thing that we've been continually grappling with, which is how do we effectively do this? And ideally, we're best doing it once, not doing our own review and then making a change as a result of the law. We ideally need to combine the 2.
Sorry, just to come back. So my question was really based on the fact that if they're unlikely to make this deadline of the 5th of February, setting up a task and finish group is more viable, because you're going to have longer potentially to work on it. Because I would be surprised if they're going to meet that 5th of February date. And I wonder if we can check that out, whether that's looking likely or not.
Again, just an observation on the point about where the government is at and the relationship with the planning infrastructure bill. Then I can certainly see the point that Councillor Johnson's making about how achievable is a report back by the 5th of February. Looking at what's happening with the planning and infrastructure bill, it now appears that I'd say that 5th of February report back here is ambitious, if not challenging, and therefore it's more likely that reconvening the task and finish group in the new year will certainly have the time it needs to report back to the subsequent meeting of this committee.
Okay, I'm a bit confused about the timeline. It seems to me that we've got more time than we don't have to rush it if we don't change the constitution until May. But that wasn't the point I was going to make. The point I was going to make, as you say, there are two parts: there's what's coming down from government and what we can change. And I think the bits, as I understand it, that are coming down from government are going to be things along the lines of more officer delegation for barn conversions, extensions, that sort of thing. It's not going to be the detail about whether or not we get 2 days to respond to something and tell the chair that we'd like it to go to committee, or whether we have 3 days. I think that is up to us as a council, and they are the sticky issues, and they're the things that we're bothered about. So I do think we can separate these two things out, and I do. That's why I think it's worth now. When Councillor Butt Phillips was chairing and we talked about it the first time, we didn't have a task and finish group. We just actually sat around the table and did it here, didn't we? So, and they were quite long meetings, but we did churn through it all, and we didn't have to have this extra sort of bureaucratic process of making sure that we had terms of reference for a task and finish group and all the rest of it. It could be that the time we've even spent talking about this today, we could have gone through those sticky issues. As I say, there's only about half a dozen of them that are the things that are bothering everybody, and I don't think that they're going to be influenced by the planning and infrastructure bill. I think they're things that we can decide locally, and that's why I'm just wondering why we need to really make a big deal of it. I don't think it's quite what you're saying, Councillor Whale. I think there are two different aspects to it, and I still think we could have a light touch review, and that's my personal position. Yeah.
I hear what you're saying, and I agree with the two section business. The constitution, in my view, is not working for the council's input to planning. Basically, it's the timetable. The timetable for a council's input is all wrong, but that's nothing to do with the new infrastructure bill. It's actually part of the constitution, but it would mean changing that section of the constitution quite considerably if you're going to make it user-friendly, not a very good word, but anyway, make it, in my mind, what is right for both the public and the councillor. Because at the moment, we're more or less rode out of commenting on planning at the right time. And
issues though, which we want to set the working party up to. Think
yes, I'm very
as soon
sorry.
as possible,
I'm just
and get them looking at these said issues. Yeah, that's not fine. Councillor Butt Philip.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think there was a point there. We seem to have stopped. There was a point where we were sort of drifting off into the state of the planning service, etc. And we've got to remember that we are the Constitution and Governance Committee, and although I'm not chair of this committee anymore, I'm still chair of the HR committee. And the same thing happens there, where people will shoehorn in much wider issues around planning into the workforce. But so we need to focus on the only thing we're responsible for is the Constitution and the terms of reference. And it does sound to me like we neither need to now, nor are we really in a position to do a sort of fundamental big review all of this. That will have, if that is going to happen, it will have to come, we'll have to address some of the issues within the planning service that influence that. We'll have to address the outcome of the planning and infrastructure bill when that's finalised and any consequential guidance from that. So we either wait for all of that to happen, which seems not to be something that's very popular, or we do, as has been articulated, a very light touch review that just focuses on the things people are worried about. We don't, and that probably, you can have a working group. They probably only need one meeting. It might be an 8-hour meeting, but you probably only need one meeting. Sit down. What are the issues, and what do we want to do about it, and then talk about logistics of doing it. So I don't see any reason why that should take a long time. So Scott said he's going to reconvene the working group working with the planning service. I think that's probably enough.
Case, and it will happen. Any other comments? So we proceed. We're more than happy. We want this reconstituted as soon as possible, and then we can air lots of these issues which people have started to talk about this afternoon. Will be the appropriate time to bring those issues forward and have a fulsome discussion. All those in favour? It's carried. Thank you.
No, it's absolutely fine. Planning is a very, very important thing that means a lot to everybody. I would like to propose, please, that the review of Appendix 5 of the Council's consultation, tell a local councillor first or think councillor first protocol be put on the next month's agenda, please, so that we can review it and see if there's anything that we can do to continue to improve what I see as an improving thing anyway. Thank you very much.
On your list on the work programme.
It's been languishing at the bottom of the works programme for a couple of years. Yeah, thank you, Martin. Appreciated.
Thank you very much. Good discussion this afternoon. I'd like to formally end the meeting. Thank you. Have a happy Christmas and Merry New Year.